So, Jason, welcome to the show, brother. How's everything with yourself?
Very good. Yourself?
I'm good. Jason, look, obviously we've both been on this journey pretty much around the world, and we both seem to have bumped into each other and connected in Bali, of all places. Every single conversation I've had with you, it's one of those moments where you just wish there was a microphone set up. So I'm just happy that we've got the opportunity to finally get this.
We have the mic,
and
we can make it happen now.
Totally. But before we jump into this, every single story I've heard from you has been incredible. And more to the point, I was on my little scooter the other day riding, and your name popped up in a book I was listening to. More to the point of what you've done, but also how you're a cog in one of the biggest conscious machines that's currently going on in the world, but also how you took a very big leap of faith and stood up and got one of the biggest standing ovations in one of their biggest speaking gigs, which is incredible.
Yes.
So Jason, I really want to kick this off. You're new to the show. How did this all start? How are you here? How did you get into where you are? And obviously there's so much more to you than Mindvalley. There's obviously the big entrepreneurial side of you. What's the story of you?
Yeah, well, that could be a very wide question, but to make it so that I'm here in Bali, the journey must start where I picked up a book, which I'm sure your audience might have heard of, called 4-Hour Workweek. The Tim Ferriss book. And I was working for a company back then. This was after I went through an entrepreneurial venture, sold shares to the partner, got hired by this company that was teaching Canadians how to buy US real estate. And in the process, I'm here to managing acquisitions, raising private funds, and overseeing a lot of the transactions. And as the company was doing a relocation to the east coast of Canada, or Ottawa, Canada, I started realizing that maybe I don't need to be in the office to get my job done. After reading that book, I decided to use one of the tactics in there, and I went over to my boss and I said, I'd like to renegotiate my salary. And the first thing he said is, Jason, you're the highest paid person here. Like, what more do you want? You're 23, you're making a 6-figure income. Like, what else do you want? I was like, I agree with you. I think I should be paid half. So now I have his attention. He's like, go on. I said, let me be paid half, but I'll go and work from home and I'll deliver the same results. Don't track my time, but I'll deliver exactly what I deliver now, and you can save money. Seems like a fair deal, agrees. And then I moved to Australia. And so the moment I got to Australia, I realized, oh wow, the cost of living in Australia is even higher than Canada. So my strategy didn't work so well. And then I went to college, or did a student exchange to Thailand when I was 20, and I had a ton of friends there. So I'm like, cost of living in Thailand is 1/3. If I'm being half, that means my purchase power is higher. So I moved to Thailand and stayed there for about 6 months. And then, long story short, is I realized that I wanted to be aligned with a company that has a mission or a bold vision of an impact it wants to make in the world. I'd ended up automating my work. 4 hours a week was pretty much what I was working at that time. I'd taken some clients, which brought me back to a 6-figure income, and working 4 hours a week, which was the dream, right? And then I realized, no, there's more to do than this. So found myself identifying this company, Mindvalley, visit their office. The moment I visit the office, I'm like, I want to be part of this mission. I want to grow with them. And I spent 7 years there.
Was it not voted one of the world's best offices in the world? The design, layout, employee culture.
Yeah, we got that through Inc. magazine, one of the coolest offices in Southeast Asia. We just got a new award for the latest office upgrades we've done. We win most democratic workplace, best places to work. These are all awards that we usually regularly get at Mindvalley. And spent 7 years there, a lot of adventures. I reenacted my remote work preferences in the last year. So I've been living in Miami. And then when I came back to Malaysia, a key insight came, which was I'm more effective when I'm close to clients than close to my coworkers.
Yep.
And this was actually something my partner brought to my attention. She moved to Bali and she's like, why aren't you following me here? You should be here too. Everyone here are potential clients and they're the audience that you usually market to. I'm like, good point. So It was a very easy decision to move to Bali, and now here I am.
That's incredible. So you actually have a pretty incredible story as well of kind of like, the thing that I love in entrepreneurship is it's always a journey of struggle. Mm-hmm. And you yourself kind of had that period, both on a personal level and also in a business sense, which has kind of embedded a lot of lessons within you. So there's a reason I want to go here, because I want to knit both of these conversations together. But just talk to us a little bit about that, because...
Well, it was funny. When I was graduating university, I would have been 20, 21. I remember going to this career fair kind of for graduates, and there was all sorts of vendors there talking about what they would be offering to you. I think Ambev, which is like the one that owns the biggest market share for alcohol. They're talking about, come and work for us as a sales rep. We're all built on meritocracy. It's all about merit. You get to earn. I was like, okay, that sounds cool. Then there was another person. They were like, oh, you come into our management training program. I'm like, oh, that's like a fast track to leadership positions. They're like, yeah. And then I was like, so what does it look like? And over this ladder, I think it was after like 5 years, you could make $40,000 or $60,000. And I'm like, what? That's not what I want. I want to make way more than that. And I'm thinking, this doesn't make sense. So I got lucky. Found myself going into real estate. And when I got into real estate, it was actually to become a salesperson on the real estate field. And quickly after, I realized there was an individual within that company that was promoting educating Canadians how to buy US real estate back in 2010. Now, for those of you who remember, 2008 had the big downturn. That means 2010 was the biggest opportunity we had ever seen. And so I was like, I'm in, I'm sold. I want to do that. And it was all about becoming a millionaire. And I had rose-colored goggles and I think...
Straight in.
Yeah. And it was at a point where I'm ignorant enough to be very bold in the actions I take, which actually brought a lot of success. Got my two best friends. We built up a company, all three of us. I think the saying was, we were young, dumb, and full of cum.
Yeah.
And
I've not heard that for years.
I've apologized for the profanity. But nonetheless, we were very ignorant in the process, but very excited, enthusiastic, and taking bold actions. And already there allowed us to have everybody notice what we were doing. We were able to attract attention. And we went down in the US where people were mentoring us on how the process works, and we ended up getting like 20 condos under contract. This is like $500,000 of contractual obligations we need to fulfill. And the reason we did that is because somebody was on the tour with us who was the cousin or uncle of that mentor, and he said, I'll fund every deal you buy. And we're like, oh my God, this is great. And then shortly after, they bring us into a studio to talk about our experience with the program. I'm on video, and for those of you who are watching the video version of this, like when I get on camera, I get excited. If you ask me to do a testimonial, I will sell it. So I'm there and I'm like, oh my God, this is the greatest program ever. All the properties used to sell for $200,000. They're now like $30,000. We're buying everything. And you're going to come here. They're going to give you the money. They're going to find you the buyers. They're going to teach you everything. And you're going to be great.
Poster boy moment.
Yes. Now that infomercial ran across Canada and recruited more people into this mentorship program. Not too long after, we send a list of properties, the wire instructions, and everything to this cousin who never replies, disappears. Oh. And so here we are, a ton of deposits in place and no idea what we're doing. So that brought me to a place that's not as exciting. I actually got diagnosed with like depression caused by stress. Found myself on antidepressant medication, seeing a psychologist. And I was just so paranoid about failing. And there was a lot of fear about failing, and I didn't want to let anybody down. Like, I felt like my reputation would be shot. I was worried about who I was selling to because I didn't know what I was selling anymore, because everything I'd been taught, I didn't know if I could trust it. But in the process, I learned all the right tactics, all the right processes, all the right tax codes, connected with the right teams, and I just built something incredible in the process. Got so knowledgeable too, and I made all those deals right. And it was really, really fascinating to me to see how much deep in the crap I was thrown that forced me to swim back, that made it the biggest growth experience of my life. Unfortunately, there was one scar that remained from this learning experience, is that I did have a fear of entrepreneurship in the process. It hurt a lot.
And this is exactly where I wanted this conversation to go. Now, right now, obviously, we're in the middle of a global pandemic. There's people who they've realized the system, the career doesn't work for them anymore. They've now got time. Some people might have woke up and thought, you know what, I've got this vision, this mission, this thing that I really want to go and do. Now, in the work that we do, there's a lot of fear that comes around entrepreneurship. I'd love to know from you, like, how did you overcome this fear? Because I think it is prolific. I think it's such a big thing that really stops people going out there and doing the thing they want to do.
I remember the day, it was 2 months ago, and from that moment, I was completely fearless. That is not the story. If you ask me how did I get rid of that fear, I didn't. I still have the fear of entrepreneurship. I still have a fear of putting myself out there. I have a fear of failing. But even if that fear is there, I'm going to choose to move forward. I've rarely, if not ever, seen a situation where I was a little afraid, with the best of intention, going forward to create value, that it never resulted in something that was a great learning or a financial abundance that came my way. And so with that as an anchor, I'm starting to feel more confident, and I'm excited about what the future holds as I step back into that field of entrepreneurship.
It's kind of one of those, isn't it? It's like you've got to keep. It's Brené Brown. What did she say about courage? It's like Courage doesn't mean that it's you're rid of fear. It's the fact that the fear is there, but you still take the actions to move through it.
Yeah. And I think that's the problem, even I witnessed myself, like I stayed with Mind Valley for 7 years, and it was comfortable. I get a steady paycheck, I get a lot of association, and you're talking about one of the greatest workplaces in the world. The idea of leaving that can be scary. Now, if you're in a terrible job, you're not getting paid well, you have a terrible culture there, you're not learning, you're not growing, then you should have very little reasons to stay. You should be really looking at moving out and doing something bold outside of that. But the problem is not when you're in those bad situations, because then the choice is easy. The problem is when you have it good. And if you talk good to great, the enemy of great is good. And so a sense of complacency, comfort, it's very tempting. And then you build habits around that. And so what would it take for you to step out of that comfort zone and go and do something great? It's going to take some courage. And that's what Brené Brown comes into, right?
I love this. Absolutely love this topic. No one's ever jumped in on this conversation before. This is brilliant. So from your story then, obviously you've realized that you've got this fear, you've acknowledged it, you've honored it, and you've still stepped through. There's going to be a lot of our listeners right now who are in this same position. So if you were to speak to our listeners now and say, look, I've been there, this is how I got through it, what would be your advice to people who know there's something better out there, there's a better tomorrow, but they might be scared to take that first step?
So I remember for me, it was about a year ago, I was coming at that crossroads at that time. I felt like I actually had a foot out of the door of the organization. There were frustrations I'd had, and I realized that one of the things that was keeping me there was not the contribution, was actually the fear of a lost identity.
Oh.
Now, stick with me here. Me being the Jason at Mind Valley was so ingrained to my identity that losing that felt like I would lose myself. And I realized that this was paralyzing me, and it was very selfish of me to continue working at Mind Valley with this belief. And I'll tell you why. The reason's because now I couldn't show up as my full self. I only showed up as a fearful self. I showed up as me not wanting to make those mistakes. I'm showing as someone that's not stepping into making bold actions to contribute great value. Instead, I'm operating from a place of fear and clinging on to my identity. So the exercise I did, so for the listeners, if you're finding yourself in a similar situation where you're like, who am I outside of this organization? I actually had to role play in my mind. And I'm glad I'm part of a men's circle. I call them my boys. We're 3 people, we get on calls every week just to push ourselves and challenge the way we think. And I think that's a practical thing to do, just having some people you can openly talk to just to challenge your beliefs. And so one of them gave me an exercise. They're like, imagine you're fired today. What are your next steps? What are your next steps? So I realized that it wasn't as important about what I would do as much as it was important about who could I reach out to. And so I remember doing that and saying like, okay, income's gone, like 6-figure salary, gone, everything's gone. What do I do now? Am I stuck? And I'm like, okay, well, let's start with the easy stuff, which would be again the comfort zone. But I was like, could I get another job? I mean, to me, that was just a default thing I thought. I was like, could I get another job? Like the worst case scenario, could I get another job? I'm like, my God, I have the CEO of HubSpot in my Rolodex. I know everybody else in e-learning. I've developed so many skills. I've worked on being a better salesperson. I know how to sell. Who in the world does not want a salesperson on their team? And so I realized, oh my God, I have so many people I could reach out to and get employment. But then I'm like, wait, why would I step back into employment? I started thinking, who out of these people could benefit from my services as a consultant? Who of them could want to employ me to deploy systems, to deploy processes, to facilitate? Or how many clients could I take on working minimally? I'm talking about putting a few hours a week to support them in their growth, where I simply maximize on what is it that I love to do. And then I go, holy shit, I'm actually holding myself back a lot. And then this is what the magic moment was, is I realized if I leave this organization, my identity is not scarred. Matter of fact, I have a full identity for myself. And then I sat down and said, why would I choose to stay? And when I sat there and I said, I choose to stay because I still believe in the management, I still believe in the vision, I still think there's amazing things I can learn through this organization, which was all about the impact that I could do on a global scale. But I started looking at my own contribution. I'm like, I can still make amazing connections through this organization, which is still extremely valuable to me. And so I decided to stay. And the energy that I started showing up at in the organization shifted. Matter of fact, this is where the Superhumans at Work podcast was developed, because I was able to recognize what is it that I do that provides the most value, And I spoke to the leadership team and I said, this is what I do best. Why don't I do more of that? And they're saying, I agree. And because I had some history there, I've always given a lot. I became someone that was quite trustworthy, quite indispensable in the roles that I played. So they gave me a shot. And now I get a chance to run this podcast. I get to do amazing things. And the more as I progress away from Mindvalley, the more that I find myself working on exactly the skills that generate the most amount of value, where I win, the organization wins, and it's a better choice.
The thing I love about your story, and it was reinforced in this book, is how I always think it's either the pain that's going to create the shift or inspiration. So a lot of people, like, in that question, in when the income's gone, you have to become really creative to move yourself away from pain, or you can be pulled through inspiration of a better tomorrow.
Yep.
And the fun thing I love about your story is you're experiencing it through both of them, and through that like method, you've kind of gone, what's the worst case scenario, but what also can I aim at tomorrow, which kind of brings me here as well. The other thing that I kind of want to speak to you about on this is, again, jumping into that book, The Buddha and the Badass, where it brings up your little story, is there was a moment where there was a complete failure at one of the big events. Someone didn't show up, didn't they? How did you just rock up onto the stage and deliver a standing ovation speech? Like, what trigger, what was the leadership quality, what gave you that? Like,
yeah, it's funny because
it's just such a bold move.
Well, I'll tell you even more. Like in that book, they speak about the story where a speaker canceled at an event and they're looking for another speaker. And I went and said, I have a talk I could deliver. And at that point, it's like, who's this Jason Marc Campbell? Nobody knows. And so I go to Vision. I'm like, give me a chance. He's like, we can't just put any employee on the stage. I have to back up a little bit, which is the fact that this talk came from insight. It just came to me as I was driving to the office, and there was a training on public speaking that Vision had facilitated, because every employee in the company puts together their dreams of what they want to grow. And one of them was public speaking. And so I had put it down. A lot of people had put it down. So Vision facilitated a speaker trainer to come to the office, and you had to go deliver a 5-minute speech. The 5-minute speech I thought of on my way to the office became the blueprint of that speech that I wanted to do at A-Fest. I didn't expect to do it at A-Fest, but I knew that I had a message that I thought needed to be shared to the masses. So I signed up at Toastmasters. I practiced this speech at Toastmasters. I built slides for this talk. And when I got to A-Fest, I asked if I could deliver that talk at A-Fest before the event happened, before this cancellation. I said, I want to talk. I was told no. I was like, I still feel like I can deliver this talk. So I pretended as if it was a yes. And I still developed that talk.
I absolutely love that.
The days before, that speaker canceled. But what was missing from that book is they didn't pick me to speak after that speaker canceled. They picked someone else. So they picked someone else to go speak, and that person also canceled. And, I don't know what kind of God the listeners here are believing in, but if it's the universe, in essence, I was so prepared to give that talk that mountains were moved to create that possibility. And so 2 speakers had to cancel, and I just stood in front of Vision as they're trying to figure out how to replace it. And I'm like, I stood and spoke with confidence. I just said, I have the greatest talk ever. I'm ready to rock it. My slides are loaded up. I was the person doing the AV. I was the one setting up the slides. I'm like, my slides are already loaded. If you just throw me on the stage, I'm ready to rock it. And if you go see that talk, which is about selling is the greatest expression of love, you'll notice I rock it in my bare socks, no shoes.
Oh man, I love it. The thing that I'm getting through this whole conversation is with you, it's like when you get visual and when you start asking yourself the right questions, and I think this will be a huge part for the audience, this is where the answers start to come. But also kind of like living in it and believing in it. So for example, you had to get creative, you had to ask yourself the right questions in all of these different areas of your life. And even when kind of like push came to shove, you still had to believe in yourself and kind of will things to move before it happened.
The strong belief is definitely a huge part of it. And funny enough, that talk has become a pillar to me as I'm currently writing a book that is based on that exact talk. And so again, I got very clear. Now, this is actually an interesting lesson because I said I was been wanting to write a book since I'm 25. I'm 32 now. And so what did it take for me to write a book? I had the idea, let's say this would be 5 years ago. I had the idea. And so what happened in those 5 years? Well, it took me 4 years and a half to say that I wanted to write a book and take no actions on it. And then I ended up actually...
I feel like you're speaking to me. I literally feel like you're speaking to me here.
I took 4 years and a half not taking action, just putting it out there. And then it took one moment of saying, what is the one thing? Like if you're familiar with the book, The One Thing, one of the goals I had set, and I'm very clear on the way I structure my goals. Like I have goals in every area of my life. And one of them was develop a personal brand. I feel like a personal brand is one of the biggest assets you can develop, so you can never be stuck in life. You always have a network, a brand, and like this is, so it's like, okay, if I want to build a personal brand, do I build a product, an online product? Do I just sell consulting? Okay, how do I become more credible? And I'm trying to think like, what are all the different things I need to do? I need to post on social media. Oh, I hate posting on social media. I need to build a following. Oh, it feels like a grind. And then I started thinking, no, what is the one thing that makes it that people want to find you, want to hear from you, that makes you a thought leader? To me, it was easy. Become an author. Write a book. And so when I made that decision, and I was like, a book, and it was actually through a conversation with a friend. A friend just nudged me, and he's like, you need to write a book. Everything else will fall into place once you have that. I was like, oh yeah, because if I want to do an online product, then I can base it on the book. Everything else.
Were you saying that to yourself as well, but it took someone external to kind of reinforce it internal?
100%. Because I could say it to myself, but that's not convincing enough until I had someone kind of just give me a little slap.
That's the story of this podcast.
Oh, man.
It's the same thing, 2 years.
But then again, I also understand the power of energy. And energy being money. Money, I believe, is just a stored energy. And I realize if something's important to me, put energy into it. This can be time, this can be effort, but I also think it's putting money.
Yep.
So even if I could go out, read some blogs, pick up a book on how to write a book, and just that, $20, no. To me, it demanded real energy. And just like when I did that real estate venture, I ended up paying $20,000, $30,000 to get coaching, to get into real estate. It wasn't about the coaching, because like I told you, it was a scam. It was the energy I put in. I committed $20,000 units of energy, and so I wasn't going to let myself fail, and I would move boldly. Just like for the book, I went with Scribe, and then I said, if I give them $10,000 to teach me about book writing, then I know I've made a commitment that's real. And we went through that workshop, and in essence, it basically helped me work through the fears I had about writing a book and being clear on why that was important.
That's incredible. Two things. With you have this, I've always found in successful people and people who I've interviewed on this show, they always have ways of getting clear, or they practice self-awareness more than any. I think it's one of the biggest skills in entrepreneurship, business, investing, the works. What are things that you do to get that? Because one of the biggest things that I just feel like I just hear from you all the time is this sheer sense of clarity, certainty, awareness, consciousness. How do you leverage yourself to get to that? Because that's like the leadership skill, really, isn't it?
If you don't do it yourself, don't worry. It'll be done for you. This is coming back through your learning through inspiration or pain. I went through shit. I went through shit because I wasn't ready to pick up the lesson myself. It was interesting. I did an exercise where it was about identifying your core values, right?
Yep.
And what they made you do is look at all the best moments in your life and all the worst moments in your life. And then in the best moments of your life, it said, what are the words that come to mind when you think of those moments? And I remember joy, fun, excitement, curiosity. And I was like, okay, that's good. Then they're like, in this low moment, what was the things you were telling yourself in those lows, that you labeled yourself as in those lows? Coward, liar, fake, betrayal, like all these negative things that I told myself. And this was following a breakup. It's following a breakup, and
so it was like amplified even more.
Yeah, it was like the worst moments of my life have been usually breakups, and that real estate moment where, I realized like, oh my God, I'm a fraud. I don't have integrity. And what was interesting through that exercise, they said, now look at the words you put in those low moments and flip them around. And there's a hint as to what your core values are, because if you labeled yourself with all those negative things, it's because you didn't live up to your core value. That's why it was painful. And so that's where I discovered things like courage and integrity were core values to me, because in the moments that I acted like a coward, in the moments that I lacked integrity, had become the most painful lessons of my life. Now, following that moment, I ended up realizing like, okay, I looked in the mirror and I said, this is not the man I want to be. I want to be better. I can be better. And whether this was a sustainable way to growth, but I think there was a certain level of self-loathing that came, which is like, I want to change, I need to change. And that need to change really fuels rapid growth. So from there, I started realizing that, I had no anchor in spirituality, which kind of takes away any kind of purpose of life. Like if you don't have any basis.
Were you quite closed at that point? Like, not really.
I would do meditation. I was into personal growth, but I actually came from a place of, oh, look at me. So perfect me. I'm going to be able to help other people that are so less fortunate than me. by giving them the courses that they need to take so that they can grow and be better versions of themselves and maybe even get as close to awesome as I am. And of course, that's being the biggest dick you could possibly be.
I watched a interview with JP Sears and Ed Milet, and he was on about that. He was on about how it was arrogant leadership. And it was just like when he woke up to that and he realized he just couldn't believe that that's the way he'd acted.
Yeah.
And I get that, because that's once upon a time I was in that position as well. How did you kind of humble yourself, or did the universe humble you?
Well, that's from that moment, and I wanted to rebuild myself. Then I said, I am not a teacher, I am a student. And that humbled myself. I got very quiet and I started realizing everything I've been selling to other people in personal growth that I hadn't studied are everything that I needed. So I dug, like the biggest things I went into, Conversations with God, Neil Donald Walsh, brilliant literature. Yeah. Went through that. I went through a course with a professor, Srikumar Rao. It was the Quest for Personal Mastery. Again, just bringing ancient wisdom and practices to the modern without any of the dogma about how to see why your mind behaves certain ways, why do we take certain actions. And it was anything that would bring me closer to self-mastery, self-awareness, which is when you mentioned those words earlier. I was like, I love this. And I realized that I'm a piece of rock. And if I want this to become a statue, it's just one little chisel at a time. This is Jim Rohn stuff here. I'm building an unshakable character. But I realized if I want to be a man of strong character, there's some growth I need to go through. And this is something piece by piece. And one of the biggest shifts that I've made in the process is I started taking extreme ownership and responsibility for absolutely everything in my life. And when I did this, it was the ultimate freedom and the ultimate superpower. It means that I could not step back into a space of being a victim. There's times I do, but every time I do, I'm reminded, no, wait, this is all the circumstances of choices that I've made. And today is another moment that I can make one of those choices. And that is a liberating power.
100%. There's a moment here which has just spoke to me. We went for breakfast, and there's a moment I can remember through that breakfast, like, I'm going to hang around with this dude 100%. There was a moment when you got screwed over through the scam, and this kind of like wraps this whole story kind of into one, really, where everything was against you. You got the money off all the people, and everything had just gone to shit, put it bluntly. And you took complete ownership in a situation where you could have hid or run away and played to the values that weren't you, the complete opposing values that you are. You took complete ownership of that event and turned it around. And that is no small feat.
Thank you.
That really is no small feat, and that really, really stood out for me. I'd love to kind of with that sort of stuff, that is extreme ownership, because you didn't just take ownership for the mess you were in, you took ownership to do good to all the other people as well.
Yeah. Which
is a big thing.
Yeah.
Was that one of the biggest moments where you kind of got that lesson of you take ownership of this mess? And
it's interesting. Now that you bring me back to that moment, it might have actually been not as heroic as you paint it right now. I think there's a part of me that actually is quite the people pleaser, which is something that I've become aware of and I'm trying to shed away as well, because sometimes it serves me, sometimes it doesn't. But in this case, I think it did serve me, is that I had such a care about what other people think of me that the idea of being that person who screwed over other people was unimaginable to me. And with that became the relentless energy that I had to make it right. And whether that was a good or bad intention behind it brought the result that was quite great. Now, when I think of things from today's perspective, I try to think more of the fact that we always have a responsibility to care for the impact of every sale we make. Like every sale, I'm talking about, sharing an idea, sharing an opinion, is actually the sale of an idea, trying to recruit people to share the same thought. If I sell a product or a service to someone, I do need to care and take responsibility of whatever happens with that sale. And if you actually have that level of care, which in my principles I call selling with love, then you can actually always go boldly, always take care of people, and you won't be able to outgive the universe. You're going to go out there and you're going to make some beautiful transactions if you keep caring for people. Your capacity to care for more and more will have a direct correlation with your level of abundance, because you'll be building a network, you'll have a great reputation, people will trust you. This speaks gold as you go into entrepreneurship, because people want to know that they can do business with you and they can trust you. And if you're someone that always extends care and you nurture that capacity to have empathy and care and love the people you do business with, then you are on a rock solid road to be successful.
Perfect segue where I wanted to go with this. The big thing that stands out for me with you is you lead with love, compassion, and also the thing that I love, and I think we can get a lot of value for the entrepreneurial people who are in business here, is selling, selling with love. I think these are real big things. I think people have poor mindsets when it comes around money and asking for money, relating it to self-worth and things along the lines of that. I'd love to speak more on this. I know, you're building an amazing book on this, and I really can't wait to read it because this really is my sort of literature. But I'd love to speak about this, like transactional relationships. Like, let's just jump in on that. Like, why do people struggle? How can we help them and give them some value today in this area?
I'm sure your audience is all at various levels, but the simplest way that I can paint the picture here is that I can give a definition of sales that people can wrap their heads around, and then we can start dissecting that missing element that changes the frequency of the sale. Selling is an energy exchange.
I love this language. I was like, yes.
We're going for it. Okay. Here comes the definition. Selling is nothing more than an energy exchange between conscious beings.
Yep.
When you know what you offer is so much more than what you ask in return, what balances the equation is the emotion of love. Now, let's unpack that a little bit. Selling is nothing more than an energy exchange between conscious beings. You, conscious, buyer, conscious. Energy exchange, we're talking about goods and services. They're basically energy. To create the good takes energy, takes time. The services is delivered, uses energy.
Yep.
What you're asking in return is money. Money is nothing more than stored energy. That's what it is. So now you're just exchanging energy. And so if you know that, let's say, the person that's buying what you're about to give them is going to be valuable to them, and let's call them energy units, is worth 100 energy units for them in their lives. That's the difference it's going to make in their lives. And you can sell it for 20 and be profitable. Then you need to be relentless, because what will balance that energy is the energy of love. And the beauty is that it's not just giving it to the buyer, you will feel it too. It's the ultimate source of renewable energy, because every transaction made from love builds love in you, builds love in the buyer, and actually raises the frequency of the planet.
Win, win, win.
100%. And now, if you're not selling from love, then what are you selling from?
Scarcity.
Yeah. So there's 4 levels of emotion. The one that a lot of people that might be struggling with sales, that feel blocked around sales, would be what I call the guilt, shame blockages. Okay? I'll do this really quick for your listeners because we unpacked that for quite a while. But the source of the shame and guilt come from 3 big sources I found. One is the product you're selling is crap and you know it. And at that point, you better go fix the product.
Yep.
Second is you actually have memories and blockages in your past that actually hold you back from selling. You have an encounter with, let's say, a bad salesperson. If I think about salesperson, what's the douchebag salesperson that comes to mind? Car salesman. A new car or a used car?
My current car.
Your current car.
Yep.
So when you bought that car, it was from a salesperson, you got a bad interaction?
Yep.
Okay. What happened?
It's still ongoing.
What happened?
I've been trying to get in contact. Oh no, I'm not going to be that stupid actually.
Okay, let's keep that for another time.
Yeah,
what
yeah.
I would say is, big purchase that we all do, buying a car, buying a house, is usually done through a salesperson. And those people might not be the most trained people, and they might have different levels of abundance as you do. And we will attach that memory to actually say, wow, if I'm a salesperson, I'm like that person. And if that is in your mind, then every sale you make is painful, is very painful, because now you need to step into the identity of something you hate, right? Buy your first house, maybe you had a bad realtor. Again, you're like, wow, if I become a salesperson, that means I'm like that realtor that took advantage of me, that used car salesperson that took advantage. Go back to any person that negatively impacted you in the sale, and you will remember that, and you will say, my God, I'll be choosing that identity, and this will hurt.
I think also on that, I don't know if this is different in Canada, the British mentality around money and sales as well is it's parentally conditioned in as well. Like our parents hate salespeople.
Yes, your parents.
So even without the trauma, it's still kind of ingrained in you from authority. Yeah.
Actually, that's a great point. I actually hadn't thought of this point, but I love it that it actually gets passed down through the conditioning culturally from the parents. But you mentioned parents, which actually brought me to the third point. What was the game console you wanted when you were a kid? PlayStation. You wanted it bad, right?
Yep.
Are kids good or bad salespeople?
Amazing.
They're amazing because they're relentless, they're shameless, but they're really bad. They don't care. Like, they don't care about the person they're selling to. They didn't learn tactics on closing. They don't have, the triggers of influence. They didn't build sales funnels. All they do is just ask relentlessly.
I used to rip up the magazine and put it on the pillows, like slip it in envelopes, next to the car keys, everything.
And if you were a parent and you had this little kid that keeps saying, I want a PlayStation, please, 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 mom and dad, come on. And you're seeing all this, and it just so happens that month you're pretty tight on cash flow. And you just don't have the dispensable income to fit the budget to buy the PlayStation for your kid. And the kid will never stop asking. What is the point that the parents usually convince the kid to stop asking?
Interesting.
Hey, no means no. Stop asking. And the parents can get mad. And if that memory made an imprint saying, oh wow, if I ask too much, if I'm persistent too much, that means I get cut off from the love of my role models, mom and dad. If I'm in a sales scenario, do I hesitate to pick up the phone? Oh, I called him yesterday. If I call again, am I going to be annoying? It brings back these beliefs about not being loved. It's painful. And now I'm like, I don't want to annoy. Oh, I don't want to send to you. Am I sending too many emails?
Fear of being too much.
Yeah. So now you're resisting every sales interaction because it reminds you of the times you were asking too much and you got scolded.
I've never thought of that.
Yeah.
Never thought of that.
Yeah. And so are you asking too much? And then, I remember this one time when I was booking appointments for realtors and getting them to go do home evaluations. Person calls, says, I want to know how much my house is worth. I'm like, no problem. We can send a realtor. They'll do a full evaluation. Just give me the number over the phone. I'm like, oh, we can't. I had a full script, kept going. Then they're like, okay, well, no, I'm not ready. Maybe call me back in 3 months. No problem. Follow the process, month and a half, call back. Didn't answer, call back the next day. Didn't answer, call back the next day. Leave a voicemail. Again, I ended up calling 27 times. On the 28th time, she picked up. She said, fine, just send someone over. Person goes over, does a home valuation, signs on the spot. And then they ask, why did you sign with us? She's like, I don't know, but you had this kid call me 27 times. And if you're that motivated to get me as a person who lists their house, I know you're going to sell my house too. And so without that fear of rejection, you can be relentless. It takes at least 4 follow-ups to do the average sales transaction. Most people give up after 1, 2, or 3.
I love this persistence. It's the same in the podcast world.
Yeah.
The podcast world. They say it takes roughly between 80 and 100 for it to build traction. Most people give up at 20, not even hit 20.
Et voila.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to get Seth Godin on my podcast. I've reached out to him at least 5 times. And every time he replies with one sentence saying,
no.
Thanks, no. And I'm like, oh, Seth, if you're listening to this, I will want to interview you one day.
We made the approach for Neil Donald Walsh the other day. I was like, oh, this hurts really, like getting the blockage now. Do you know what I mean? It's like, So, yeah.
We can talk about that after.
Yeah, we'll get in that one.
But that being said, once you clear that, so obviously you got to do some personal growth work, get some self-awareness, realize that it's fear of rejection. Then you can go out. The best thing about selling is that you can be in a rapid iteration of facing your fears of rejection. Like being on a telephone salesperson, like a lot of the top entrepreneurs I know, like Vishen Lakhiani, who are telephone salespeople. Why? Well, guess what? You get rid of the fear of rejection. You realize it's just a numbers game. It's not personal. The person wasn't ready, didn't appreciate the value. That's okay. You move on.
The emotion's removed. The emotion becomes removed, doesn't it?
It does.
So why do you feel that is that kind of like one of the biggest things to this? Are a lot of people weighing too much on sales, like putting too much on themselves, putting too much on the other person, instead of just trying to be like, look, I can help you with. Does that make sense?
Well, here's what happens. So let's say you got rid of this, the sabotaging or the blockages that happen when you're at a kind of guilt shame level, which is the first level of the 4, the top one being love. But there's this middle ground that you grow to. And I think that's where, one, you sabotage yourself, and the other is you kind of become a dangerous fool. The second level is the dangerous fool. This is where you learn the tips or tricks of the sale, and you realize how much abundance it brings you, but you don't take full responsibility of the impact that it has to everybody else.
Yep.
I call this the fear-pride paradox, because you become that asshole. You become the Wolf of Wall Street. You become every caricature of every effective salesperson you've ever seen that sold something that was scammy, that took advantage of people, and you start thinking, wow, I don't want to be that person.
Yep, you're seeing that everywhere as well at the minute.
That's why there's so many negative sales that happen, because people that get into that, it's kind of like a magic potion that's not sustainable, and it actually hurts the world.
Though, all my conversations keep coming back to this. Intuitively, at some level, there's a knowing Does that make sense? There's red flags, I'm not quite sure if in your story with the scam that happened, but there's just something. And like when you're entering in a conversation and you know that it's not the right thing, there's an element of your being which is
our craving for certainty.
Yep.
These people understand that you have a craving for certainty in a world of change. And when you see one confident person telling you, yes, this is it, that's all you need to decide, and takes away any fear of, is this the right solution? And they tell you this is the right solution, and you're like, you have red flags, but you choose to ignore them, because if I can have certainty, this will remove a pain that I have. And you can exploit that. And the inner knowing is also on the side of the seller. If you're the person that operates from that place of it, you're literally, I say it's the fear pride paradox, because you act like it's from pride, but the reason you keep selling is because you have a fear of lack of abundance, and you feel like you need to get more. It's an insatiable hole. And if you're doing something that's actually hurting the other person, you need to come back from a place of unity, not separation. What hurts the other hurts you, but you don't want to face that inner knowing. And so you'll often find that people that are at that level of selling are often paired with addiction issues to numb the awareness. Alcohol, gambling, sex, love, drugs usually find themselves in the same realms as people that are highly effective at selling and very little regard to the consequences of their sales.
Dude, this is an incredible conversation. I'm just thinking now, because obviously with the work we do, I'm very anal in particular on who we work with. And there's always things when you're speaking to people about the products, how they sell it and all that sort of stuff. And I'm just lining the dots on the things that you say. I'm like, do you know what? That's the thing that I actually saw intuitively in that brand where I couldn't work with them. And it's just amazing to hear how that's actually broken down. Like, is that actually the process I'm going through? It's like, no, this is hurting people.
Yeah. And so the best part is that the better you become of a seller, the better you become of a buyer. And you can have the lens to make sure that you send your energy, your money, to the right kinds of individuals when you detect that they are selling from a place of love. If they don't pass the mark and you detect those red flags, you can be aware of what's going on.
You can give one piece of advice now to people, be it in business or buyers or whatever, which could drastically help them at whatever point it would be. What would you say to people that could maybe wake them up or shift a blockage? Or
I would say that, a lot of times you can be in a scenario where you're buying a bad product. Don't let your fear of embarrassment to ask the questions you really want to ask in a purchase scenario. Like, I'll give you an example. You're about to buy this coaching package. This person's saying, "Hey everybody, my name is ABC, and I make a 7-figure income, and I got this Ferrari.
Instagram.
And, look, you can be a star. Everybody loves me, and you can be loved too if you give me $5,000 for my coaching program." Then, if the person has the right to use items to brag to convert the sale, you have the right as a buyer to ask them to show you proof of what they claim. If someone tells you they're making a 7-figure income...
This has recently happened.
Has it?
Yeah, someone got outed on Shopify. They got asked to show the Shopify bill and they couldn't do it.
Show the Shopify bill. Ask them for a list of customers. Ask for the reference. Ask them to show you what they made last month. Ask questions as a buyer, because the more you poke holes, the better the person needs to be as a business to be legitimate. People get away with illegitimate because we don't like to face the uncomfort of asking the tough questions.
It's weird as well, because if that was the case, the person leading through love wouldn't have any anger, resentment, rage. It would just be, yeah, sure, here you go. There's no resistance in the question being answered.
100%. I mean, I even flip it around. Let's say you're a new entrepreneur, new business, and you're like, I don't have the clients. First off, there's one thing I say when you because there's 5 loves in selling. One of them is love the product. I say, don't fake it till you make it. I say, don't fake it, make it. Yeah. Like, make your product awesome. Let's say you don't have massive income yet, and you want to go out. There's this one line that I think is very helpful for people just beginning, which is, when you're at the beginning, you have a resource and a skill and what I call a unique selling proposition that most people don't when they have established business, is that every customer you get at the beginning are going to be treated like more gold than any other customer. Yeah. And so if you can go in a sales scenario and I'd go like, Simon, I know you want to do some business, you want to do some coaching, and maybe I'm the person that can coach you right now, but let me tell you something. You're going to be my first client. Look at my website. I don't have testimonials. I'm expecting your face to be out there, which means I'm going to be treating you like the best, most valuable person that exists on my planet. Matter of fact, I will not stop until I solve every problem in your life. I'm going to charge you $5,000, and if you're not happy, I'll give you a full refund. But I'm telling you right now, there's no other person you can do business with that will care as much as I care to make sure that you have all the transformations you're looking for. I'm ready to get started.
Can you imagine the difference in that? Again, I'm thinking to personal brands who I've helped in the past, and they've either lied to get that off the floor, or it's been a faked testimonial or something along the lines of that. If you were just to lead through that, business is just pure transparency.
100%. And you can't get away with it anymore.
No,
It'll catch up.
The world's exposing piece by piece.
Yeah.
Jason, this has been a remarkable conversation. I'm so glad we jumped into this. If you could go back in time to whatever period you can think of, and you could give yourself one piece of advice to help little Jason on his entrepreneurial life journey, what would you give him? What would you speak?
Would he listen?
Yeah, that's right.
Would he listen? It's funny. I've been asked this question before, and I guess the first thing that comes to mind is nothing. It's nothing because I think everything that I've experienced is what I needed to experience to get me to where I am now. And I'll close with this. There's a book I read which is amazing. It's called The 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. And one of those agreements is always do your best. And I love this one because it really took away a lot of these ideas of not enoughness, which is a plague for humanity right now. Everybody's comparing themselves to others. We're not enough, and it forces you into that scarcity, that fear-pride paradox. It's literally because I'm not enough, I need to make more money, and it becomes an insatiable desire, right? When you recognize that all you can do is your best, and what you do every single day is your best, you never do not your best. Even if you're having the worst day, you're doing the best you can given the situation that you're feeling right now. So if I go to little Jason, maybe that would be the advice. To be like, hey, you're going to be okay. You're always doing your best. And if I think a lot of people realize that, then once you've acknowledged that, hey, this is the best I can do right now, then you can start thinking, what's my next step? What's my next best? And there's no level of action that is considered inferior. Just follow the right thing and things will work out.
I love the fact you've just said this. I always think there's so much like overcomplication on personal development advice and stuff like that. And we really could help a lot if it was do the best for you, do the best for others.
That's it. And sometimes your best is maybe, you're just getting started. Maybe your service isn't that developed, but then, hey, do a little thing to improve your service, improve your product. You're an entrepreneur just getting started. Do the best you can. Do a little more after service. Add something to your offer to take on more of the risk and not put it on the buyer. Do your best. Grow your business. Make a transaction. It's always your best. You're okay. Everything's going to be okay. And if you come with the energy, it's kind of like when I was talking about how I had this identity dependence with Mind Valley. Once I shed that and realized like, hey, I'm a full person. I am enough just as me. Again, then I realized I am always doing my best. So I stopped worrying about it and I start taking the right action.
Jason, I love this entire conversation. Last but not least, buddy, what does it mean to you to be able to lead a nourished life?
Well, for me, it's all about teach more people to sell with love. If everybody, like everything that we take for granted, every real estate that exists, every product that gets sold is all a product of sale. If more people sell from a place of love, we will solve every problem on the planet.
Yeah, I can just open this up. I'm trying to contain this conversation, but it goes into every area of life. Everything is a transaction of energy.
Yes.
Relationships, it's a transaction of love.
Yes.
Sales. A lot of people who in business struggle in business, also struggle in relationships. There's just so much crossover with this sort of stuff. It's incredible. Dude, I can't wait to have you back on, really. So next time I want a book here. We do the same thing in this incredible villa and go again, mate. So, dude, I appreciate you coming on. Thank you.
It was a pleasure to be here.
Oh, also, where can everyone find you? Where do you hang around online?
Well, if I have a cheat sheet for selling with love. Would your audience want that?
Yep. So if you're listening to this conversation, be it through YouTube, on the podcast, we'll put it into the show notes below. What exactly is that?
There's just going to be a cheat sheet through the five loves in selling. And I just give you questions you can ask yourself so you can make sure you have the answers to that. And when you do, then you know you can always step back into love.
That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. And Jason, where can people find you on Instagram, Facebook?
Jason Marc Campbell. Marc is with a C because I'm a French Canadian. So Jason Marc Campbell. Send me a DM if you listen to me here. I'd love to just hear your feedback, get to have a conversation with you, get to understand you better, and hopefully I can help out too.
Dude, awesome.